The unknown boy. The boy sat in the back row of the classroom, silent, eyes drifting across words he couldn't understand. Letters danced. Sentences collapsed. Each page of the textbook might as well have been written in code. Thomas Cruise Maypother Ford didn't know what was wrong with him. Only that teachers sighed when they called his name and classmates snickered when he tried to read aloud. He spoke little at school, even less at home. Their cramped house in Syracuse felt colder than the winters outside. His father, an electrical engineer between jobs more often than in them, ruled the house like a drill sergeant. One mistake, a dropped fork, a muttered answer, was met with either explosive silence or sudden rage. His mother tried to soften the blows, but she was tired, always working extra shifts to feed 4 children and a husband who resented them all. Tom learned early how to disappear. He kept his eyes down, his voice quiet, and his thoughts buried. But buried things grow roots. At night, he would lie awake, staring at the cracked ceiling. He imagined himself somewhere else, on a ship, in a war, on stage. He didn't want to be famous. He wanted to be seen. He tried sports, desperate for approval. Baseball, wrestling, soccer. But he was short, awkward, and lacked the coordination others seemed born with. Coaches overlooked him. His father mocked him. His sisters, busy with their own worlds, barely noticed. Then one afternoon in 7th grade, everything changed. Mrs. Dillard, the drama teacher, stormed into the lunchroom holding a clipboard and calling names for the school play. Tom hadn't signed up, but she needed someone, anyone, to read a part. He hesitated, then followed her. The auditorium smelled like dust and old wood. He stood on stage, heart pounding. She handed him a script and pointed to a line. Just read. He stumbled at first, mispronouncing words. Then something strange happened. He acted. He stopped reading and became the character. Voice rising, hands gesturing, he lost himself in the role. For the first time, he wasn't small or invisible. He was someone else, and the silence in the room was different. It wasn't disapproval. It was attention. When he finished, Mrs. Dillard blinked. "Where have you been hiding?" He shrugged, unsure how to answer. That night, for the first time, he told his mother about it. She smiled, genuinely, and touched his cheek. "Maybe that's who you are." He didn't understand what she meant. Not fully, but he held on to it. The next week, he performed in front of the school. The applause was short, polite, but for a boy who had spent his life unseen, it was thunder. And deep in his chest, something began to stir. Something that whispered, "Becoming Cruise." He left home with a backpack, a borrowed suitcase, and a name that no longer felt like his own. Thomas Cruise Maypother IV had become too heavy with history, too full of echoes he wanted to forget. So he shortened it, stripped it clean. He became Tom Cruise, not out of vanity, but survival. A name that couldn't be mocked, a name he could build something with. New York City was a blur of noise, motion, and indifference. He rented a room barely large enough for a bed and a mirror. At night, he studied faces in that mirror, mimicking expressions, rehearsing lines from borrowed scripts, shaping his voice like clay. He knew he wasn't the tallest, the most handsome, or the easiest to cast. But he also knew how to endure. He waited tables, cleaned floors, delivered packages, anything to stay in the city. Every audition was a battlefield. Too short, not enough range. You're intense but odd. The rejections came fast, sharp, and without explanation. Each one chipped away at him, but never broke him. Because under the skin of that quiet boy still lived a flicker of the applause he once heard on that school stage, and he was chasing it like fire. Then a call. It was a minor role in a military drama called Taps. Just a few lines, a side character, but he poured himself into it. The director noticed. During the shoot, his role expanded. He stood straighter. He spoke with purpose. For the first time, the camera didn't look past him. It captured him. Producers took note. A few months later, he was offered the lead in a risky, edgy film called Risky Business. It wasn't meant to be more than a teen comedy. But when he danced in his socks and sunglasses across the living room, something changed. Not just in the film, but in the audience. People didn't just watch him. They believed him. Overnight, Tom Cruise became a name people remembered. But success, as he soon discovered, was its own kind of burden. He found himself invited to parties he couldn't relate to, given interviews where he had to smile when he felt hollow, and surrounded by people who said yes too easily. Every move was watched, every misstep magnified. Still, he pushed forward, not out of arrogance, but out of fear. Fear that it would all vanish, that the quiet boy no one saw would return, reminding him none of this was real. He didn't want fame. He wanted to control his story. And as he stood on the set of his next film, lights blinding and crew bustling around him, he whispered under his breath the same words that had driven him from that small house in Syracuse. You don't have to stay who they say you are. The mask of perfection. By the time Top Gun hit theaters, Tom Cruise was no longer chasing stardom. He was it. Audiences didn't just admire him. They idolized him. Jet-fueled charisma, piercing confidence, a grin that seemed to defy gravity. But behind the aviators and million-dollar smile was a man working relentlessly to stay ahead of the myth being built around him. He trained obsessively, often pushing his body past its limits. Whether it was sprinting across rooftops or clinging to the side of airplanes, Cruise insisted on doing his own stunts, not for thrill, but for control. The set became a battlefield of precision. No line was too small to rehearse. No scene too minor to master. Mistakes weren't tolerated, not from himself, not from others. Success, he learned, was not a gift. It was a negotiation with sacrifice. But the perfection he projected came at a cost. His marriages began to unravel under the pressure of a life always under lights. Nicole, then Katie, both women fell in love with the man on screen, only to discover how deeply he had buried the man off it. Friends called him focused. Critics called him mechanical. Assistants whispered that he lived on schedule, not emotion. In private, he wrestled with isolation. In public, he became a fortress. Every smile was measured, every laugh rehearsed. He found solace in something most didn't understand, Scientology. To him, it offered clarity, control, purpose. To the world, it looked like indoctrination. Headlines multiplied as Tom Cruise lost touch. The cult of Cruise. He laughed it off in interviews, but the whispers followed him like a shadow. Still, the films kept coming. A Few Good Men, Jerry Maguire, Magnolia. Each role a reflection of some part of him. The soldier, the salesman, the lost soul searching for meaning. Yet, with every character he inhabited, it seemed harder to find his own. One night, after wrapping a late shoot, he lingered alone on set. The crew had gone home. The cameras were off. In the reflection of a prop mirror, he didn't see a star. He saw a man at war with silence. Was he still acting? Or had he become the role? He reached out to touch his reflection, then stopped. The mirror, like fame, gave back only what you showed it. Outside, thunder rolled. Rain began to tap against the soundstage roof like a slow metronome. He exhaled, then whispered, "Just keep going," because stopping meant looking back. And looking back meant facing a truth he wasn't yet ready to name. The man who ran on rooftops. At 56, Tom Cruise sprinted across the rooftops of London with the urgency of a man half his age. He was filming Mission Impossible Fallout, another high-stakes spectacle he insisted on performing without a stunt double. As he leapt from one building to the next, his foot caught the edge. Bones cracked. Pain exploded up his leg. The cameras kept rolling. So, did he? He finished the scene, limping, jaw clenched, every nerve on fire. Months of recovery followed. The crew called it insane. He called it necessary. Because Tom Cruise wasn't competing with other actors anymore. He was competing with time. For years, the world waited for him to fade, to soften, to fall in line with age. But Cruise had made a career of defiance. Not just of gravity, but of expectation. He didn't want to be remembered for playing characters. He wanted to be remembered for believing in them. The films got bigger, the stunts more dangerous. He hung from helicopters, scaled cliffs, held his breath underwater for minutes at a time. Critics called it ego. Admirers called it dedication. But Cruise knew what it really was. Redemption. Not from the headlines. Not from failed marriages or the strange doctrines he clung to. But from a boy who once sat in the back of a cold classroom, unseen, unheard, afraid. He had run his entire life, not away from his past, but toward a version of himself that felt whole. Between shoots, he stayed quiet. No parties, no scandals, no public meltdowns. He lived with discipline, with purpose. People often said they didn't really know Tom Cruise, that he was unknowable. But maybe that was the point. He wasn't trying to be understood. He was trying to be free. One winter afternoon, after wrapping another mission film, he returned to Syracuse. The street he grew up on was quieter now, the houses smaller than he remembered. His childhood home sat faded and empty, like a memory no one claimed. He didn't knock, just stood on the sidewalk, hands in his coat pockets, and looked. The windows were dark. The front steps cracked. But in his mind, he saw the boy again, awkward, restless, waiting for someone to tell him he mattered. He smiled, not a grin for cameras, a real one. A whisper rose with the wind. Not words, but a feeling. He turned and walked away, not quickly, not dramatically, just calmly. The world would continue spinning. The movies would keep coming. People would debate who he really was. But he knew. He wasn't the man who leapt from planes or clung to skyscrapers. He was the boy who refused to disappear.